So welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Laurel and I'm part of the programming team here at the Deschutes Public Library. And I'm very pleased to present Who Burrow with Marina Richie. Every month we explore a theme in our programming, and this month's theme is underground. So we have some fun things about, the Underground Railroad, the birds who burrow, and even accepting our own mortality program later this month. Before we get started, I just want to point out a couple of things for those of you in the room. There's a restroom across the hallway, and the back table has a lot of things for you to check out. And some other upcoming library programs include a program on soil health next week, and terrace catacombs, and the mycelium symbiotic relationship with plants. And two of those are going to be virtual. Our presenter this afternoon is nature writer and Bende Marina Richie. She's the author of the forthcoming book, Halcyon Journey in Search of the Belted Kingfisher. She's also a writer of interpretive panels, including an award-winning series along the Oregon coast featuring the artwork of brown pupfish. Thank you, Marina, for telling us about burrowing birds.
Well, thank you, Laurel. It's a pleasure to have an excuse to talk about my favorite bird, but the belted kingfisher. This time I'm going to add in quite a few other birds of burrows in Oregon. Before I dig in, I always like to give an acknowledgement. So I acknowledge that I'm presenting on the original homelands of the Wasco and Warm Springs people who are still here today and are thriving members of our communities. I acknowledge and thank the original stewards of this land. Oh, wait, hang on. We're ready.
There we
Got
go.
it. Thank you. Okay. So from the Oregon coast to the sagebrush steppe to the riverbanks, all of these birds featured here have one thing in common. They nest underground. And I love that there's the word burrow because it always seems a little bit cozier to me than a cave. And you'll find that some of these birds are similar in that they're diggers and others are burrowers. And we're going to delve into their lives right now. Oops. Why nest in a burrow? Well, I don't know about you, but for me, when I discovered the belted kingfisher nested in an earthen burrow and dug it out all by themselves, that was a pretty wild moment for me, an epiphany. It's like, I think I was in my 20s on a nature walk when I found out. But since then, I've come to know quite a bit about them, and I get to thinking about it. It's not a bad place to be if you want to keep your chicks safe, because they're not exposed to a predator like a stick nest, and they seem to do pretty well hidden inside there. And it's temperature controlled. When it's really cold outside, it's pretty toasty in there, and like it's pretty hot outside, it's cool. This is artwork by Ron Hopper. You'll be hearing more about his work in my book. Well, this is how I got started with kingfishers and birds of burrows. Is over a decade ago in Montana, I decided to follow the belted kingfisher. And this is a picture of Lisa Hendricks on the left and me, and we have, and her husband Paul just took this picture. We are digging down and to check a kingfisher burrow at the end of the nesting season, so the birds were no longer there. But we had been watching them all season, and you can kind of see the creek in the background, and there's a vertical bank below us. So what we did is we crossed the creek and we climbed up the bank and we had a measuring tape and we put it into the burrow, which we discovered was 4.5 feet, this tunnel leading to this burrow, and that's what the kingfishers had done all by themselves. And then we measured how far down from the top, and we went back that distance and we carefully dug down. And sure enough, we found the nesting burrow, and I'm smiling because the soil had quite a uric acid smell from those chicks being in there. But we also figured out that they had kicked that soil back and covered it up. So they don't line their nest at all, but they kept it very tight. So that led, years later, to be continuing following kingfishers here in Oregon and to this book. So I always have to give a little plug for my book because it is coming out. I'm very excited. Hopefully by the end of May, but definitely in June. And I am very pleased to finally have a chance to honor this bird. It's the first book to feature belted kingfisher. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, since I'm only going to be talking about burrows and we're going to look at a lot of other birds, just to give you a sense of this book. My pursuit of the belted kingfisher is one of curiosity and kinship with the wild creekside community in Missoula, Montana. The first book to feature North America's beloved bird of waterways, Halcyon Journey threads natural history, memoir, and myth. Epiphanies and a citizen science discovery punctuate my 7 seasons tracking a skittish pair of birds. The female is more colorful than the male, unusual and puzzling, and the bird's earthen nest holes are fiendishly difficult to locate. Far-flung adventures to other continents in search of kingfisher kin deepen my relationship with Montana birds. In winter, I explore tribal stories of the kingfisher as messenger and helper. By the water's edge, I reconcile the loss of my naturalist father and tap into my own powers inspired by the bird of the head-first plunge and the rattling call. And this is actually that nest that we watched. And this is a fledgling, having one of the first views of the world after being deep inside that burrow. So I've already talked a little bit about their nest tunnels. They can be up to 15 feet long, but that would be extremely rare, but possible. And the other thing that's pretty amazing about kingfishers is they're so egalitarian. The parents are pretty involved in everything possible they can do. And so they both are digging the burrows. They're both taking turns incubating. The eggs are usually 5 to 8. They feed the chicks, fish. They are extremely protective of their nesting areas. So you have to be really respectful around them. And they do not like human presence. So they take great care of them. They usually do well, but the dangers tend to lie outside the burrow, with Cooper's hawks are one of their #1 predators. And then, of course, there could be flooding. So things like that can happen. So I wanted to give you a sense, since I did get to watch the kingfisher nest hole for quite a long time, more than 1 season, just what it was like being inside the blind. Now, you have to see, you can kind of tell the creek is behind there. And then the blind is looking across the creek at that bank. And the birds really, even though I was very careful, they were still pretty alert to my presence. Little excerpt here and there so you can get just a sense of tiny bits of my book. My journal entries proliferated with fish deliveries and scrawled notes on the passage of dippers, swallowtail butterflies, and rough-winged swallows. Often I added my unchecked elation. How was it possible for the parents to depart from a sandy, dusty hole without one speck of dirt and feathers all in place? If I'd trundled into an earthen tunnel, I'd come out smudged and rumpled. There was always something amazing to look at with these birds. And this is a lot of what I also watched, the feeding of the chicks, unbelievable fishing displays, head first dives. And one of the amazing things kingfishers can do is they can choose the size of the fish to catch. They're that good. So when the chicks are really little, they're catching 2-inch fish, and then 3-inch fish, and 4-inch fish, and 5-inch fish. And you can tell this female is about to deliver the fish to her chick because she's got the head facing forward so that the chick will swallow without any difficulty with spines and things. Yep. All right. In a minute, Laurel's going to help me with this YouTube, but first I wanted to tell you something. I mentioned that there was a citizen science discovery that we at least published, and the 2 naturalists that were often helping me, Paul, Lisa, and I did this, and this is what we want to describe what happened, what we saw. And this was the act of 2 kingfishers, male and female pair, trying to get a hole started. Smash, as aerodynamic as a fighter jet, the female kingfisher powered into the bank. The tip of her bill jammed into the soil. She bounced off. A few seconds later, she flew down to the shallow edge of Rattlesnake Creek and bathed in the bracing waters, droplets scattering. The rinse was brief. She flapped back up to a branch, wiped her dripping beak on one wing, and preened. Well, what we saw were this for 3 days, these kingfishers were flying from at least 12 feet away, high speed into the bank, jamming it with their bills just to get a hole started. And then they would almost flutter down into the creek because they were so knocked back by it. It was quite amazing. And that would have not been in the literature. There are 13 species of kingfishers in the world that do what's called aerial ramming. That's including the belted now. And we were the first one to find that out. So there are more than 100 species of kingfishers in the world, 13 that are aerial rammers. Some of those others are ramming in other countries into termitariums, which are very, very hard surfaces. Okay, I'm gonna let Laurel is going to play just a little bit of this YouTube to give you a sense of the digging once it gets going and the rattle sound. You know, kingfishers are very vocal. You can hear them very soon. They talk a lot when they're building their nest. See the little dirt coming out? They're kicking this back with their little feet that have 2 toes fused together out of 3. It's called syndactyl toes, and it's a feature of kingfishers. And they kick with that, which makes good trouble. Just a smidge more. Come on out. Sometimes we have to go with it, but well, I think we've gotten an idea, Laurel. We can go on to the next, because now we're going to go all the way. Time to go to another place that kingfishers do inhabit, which is the Oregon coast. And I don't know about you, but I've seen kingfishers along the coast. They have nests in, I've watched great one in Coos Bay. There's other spots all along there. I've seen them fishing even at Devil's Turn. So, but we're going to talk here about a whole lot of other burrowing birds and a project that Laurel mentioned that I did, and that's got me really interested in these seabirds. So this is the interpretive sign, one of 66 that are along the Oregon coast, all featuring Oregon Islands National Wildlife Refuge, which are more than 1,800 rocky islands along the coast. They're like one refuge. They're protected for nesting seabirds. A lot of them come from thousands of miles away, and they can crowd these nest islands. You've probably seen them in the Oregon coast. And the birds have to figure out where to nest, right? So the birds are on top, and they've got their strategies with their eggs, and we've got cormorants on the side. Well, there's several of these seabirds are nesters in burrows, which can be a limiting factor too. So this is an interpretive sign about Tufted Puffins, and Ron Popish, who did the illustrations for my Kingfisher book. This is the main illustration for all these interpretive signs. He loves to do cutaways, and I do too, because it's what we can't see that's so interesting. So Tufted Puffins need to have a nesting island with soil, enough that they can make a 3 to 6 foot burrow, and they need grass, because another thing is they line. They're unlike the kingfishers; they're going to line their little bit. And they only have one chick called a puffling. I love that. And Haystack Rock, which is this sign, is at Ecola State Park. So our signs are located at the state park. So it's because obviously you're not going to put the sign out on the islands because we don't want people to go there. But Haystack Rock, as we all know, is a great place to see Tufted Puffins. And then we were also talking, I gave this presentation on Wednesday, down at Face Rock near Bandon is another good place. And a limiting factor for them, of course, are islands that have the soil. So every interpretive sign we did, we tried to give people an ocean alert, something that they could do to do something good for our birds. Because we all know a lot of our birds are declining, they're in trouble. And if the ocean birds, sustainable seafood choices make a really big difference for them. And so we listed here the seafoodwatch.org to help you choose seafood that's not going to harm birds. And we also, these forage fish, talk about how these tiny little fish are so important. See how the puffins bring all those fish to their chip? It's really, they need a lot of tiny fish. So that's been another emphasis, is to try to protect those fisheries as well. There's another sign about tufted puffins. If you go to Cape Foul weather, you'll see this one. And this is more about their amazing adaptations. And so I'm going to just let you go discover that one. You got to go to Cape Foul weather, which is between Newport and Depot Bay. Now we're going to go all the way down the coast for another interpretive sign and featuring a bird of burrow that's related to the tufted puffin. This is the Cassin's auklet. I wanted to show the artwork first because I love it so much. This is the sign itself. It's down at Wells Head State Park by Brookings. And these Cassin's auklets, when I did my research about these burrowing birds, which are about the size of chubby robins, I found out they love to play. The adults and the chicks, they literally watch them playing leapfrog and somersault and tag. And so I thought, why not engage people with that story? And then here's the interpretive sign itself, talking about, and you can see the burrow in here where they are. There's a lot of activity, but they're pretty colonial. And let's see, I wanted a few notes I wanted to mention about them. So yeah, the male and the female select the nest site together, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a burrow that they dig. In their case, unlike the tufted puffins, they can use a rocky crevice. But if they're digging, they're using their feet mostly, and whereas the puffins have that big beak, they can engage their beak and their feet to dig. And they are, but like the puffins, just one egg at the end of the burrow. And they too, like all our seabirds, face the similar threats. In addition, I read that Cassin's auklets have threats from fishing nets, so being caught, as well as the plastic, climate change that we all have to worry about. But there was one other ocean alert that you might not think about for something we can do, is to prevent invasive plants from escaping from our gardens. These cute little ice plants that a lot of people have, because they're succulents, they actually escape, and they're all along on the coast. They like the coast, Oregon and California coast. And surprisingly, they even got out on this island, I'm not sure how, and they've had to have volunteers and people, biologists, come out and pull these ice plants, because they literally make a mat that the auklets can't dig through to dig their burrow. So in addition to outcompeting native plants is another thing. So there's one more relative of the puffins and auklets. Oh, I'm going to go back. Sorry, one quick thing I forgot to say is there's another auklet too that lives. That's a burrow nester, just not featured on this interpretive sign, a rhinoceros auklet, and that one's just a smidge bigger and has a little rhinoceros-looking little horn thing and nests on nearby islands. And that one also has one chick, but what I read about them is their nest burrows can be up to 15 feet long. So I don't know what makes them such a good burrower. We'll have to find out more, but I didn't want to leave them totally out before we moved on to the pigeon guillemot. And these birds are different in that they don't come from thousands of miles away. They often spend a lot of time along the coast. Probably you've seen them with their bright scarlet feet, and they're really noticeable, and they feed in the intertidal. And this interpretive sign about them is at Still Rock near Newport. And I love this. Once again, Rom has done a nice cutaway of a burrow. And in the case of pigeon guillemots, I almost didn't put them in because they will use a lot of different nesting sites. They don't nest necessarily in a burrow, but they will dig one. but they can use rabbit burrows, they can be under warps, and they can use gypsum. They're pretty creative when it comes to finding something that they can tuck themselves into a rock crevice. So, but they certainly will do burrows. And the interpretive message we have for here for the ocean alert is protecting their nest burrows, because unlike the ones we were mentioning before, these guys can be nesting right on the mainland and sometimes right below where people like to walk out to see a view of the sunset. And of course, it's a little dangerous anyway on the Oregon coast to walk to the edge of any cliff. I don't do it, but there's also, you could accidentally crush a burrow. So another thing to pay attention to. And with that, we're going to switch to one more seabird, and this one's very different. This is a Storm-Petrel. Has anyone here seen a Storm-Petrel? Yeah, because you're a good photographer. But they are not a bird that a lot of people see. Even though there's millions of them out in major oceans of the world, they come into these islands. This interpretive sign is down by Gold Beach, Myers Beach. It's a popular surfing area near Crystal River, and the petrels nest on the islands right out there, and they're pretty darn close to the mainland. So very important that we wanted to let people know not to climb out on those rocks, because they get exposed at low tide and there's surfers around, and they could definitely crush these burrows. And the thing about Storm-Petrels is they are out at nighttime. They do so much chattering at the night. And so I'll read you about this particular sign. While you sleep, thousands of Leach's Storm-Petrels chatter under the stars. The robin-sized seabirds orbit their nesting islands on slender agile wings. Inside earthen burrows, single chicks wait to be fed. Their parents swoop in to deliver seafood smoothies made of regurgitated stomach flow from digested fish. So they've gone out fishing a long way and they've come back in. And then up here, I've got a little bit more about the nest tunnel. A male petrel digs a nest tunnel that's longer than your arm. Both parents incubate the egg, and after a certain amount of days, 40, I can't quite read, a downy chick hatches, and then I'm having a hard time reading my own writing up there. But anyway, you can read it. They live to be 20 years old, which is if they make it. So petrel peril, again, it was about the surfboard climber speed, but they are an incredible bird of the nighttime to consider. And with that, we're going to make our big jump all the way past Sisters, all the way out to the sagebrush step more. And the burrowing owls, I always think they're funny because they're called burrowing, but yet they're really borrowers. They don't do much burrowing. They can in a pinch, and they certainly like to remodel their places, but they are much more apt to use other abandoned burrows from ground squirrels, foxes, prairie dogs, and badgers. And Laurel's going to show us just a little clip of this one. This is the one that volume gets a little loud, I think. So when there's abandoned burrow, of course, badgers would love to eat one of those pint-sized burrowing owls if they could. But for those of you who've seen burrowing owls, you usually see more than one because they're pretty social. And you've just been watching all these seabirds with their one chip. Well, a burrowing owl will have, like, what is it, 3 to 8? I think I got it written down here. So 2 to 12 eggs, a lot of eggs. And they do something that's pretty fun is they will line their nest burrow with dung, and that attracts insects and dung beetles, which of course they like to eat, and there they are right at the entry. Pretty clever. I did ask Chuck Gates, who's our local, one of our local birding experts, if there are burrowing owls in this area at all, and he said no, they haven't been seen for a very long time. I think it's been reported 8 times and only twice in the last 12 years around here. And there's some scattered pairs of eastern Cook County. So it's probably much better to go east of here. And of course, we all know that burrowing owls, have suffered from the loss of prairie dog towns, but they also have quite a bit of respect and protection though too. So hopefully we will continue to see them. And I thought that was interesting that they are also migratory in their northern part of their range. So they are back now, but they don't go as far as the next bird we're going to be taking a look at, and that is, I think, for some reason. Get that little. Yeah, you got it. Thank you. I'm not sure why that didn't go. So, and this is a bank swallow. I don't know about you, but I always think it's exciting when springtime we start seeing swallows. And of course, we see tree swallows, violet green swallows, but the bank swallow is our tiny swallow, and also, like all these birds, goes as far as South America, and it's coming back now. And they are incredible nest digger, tunnel diggers, and they use everything they have, their wings, their beaks, their feet, to dig these long tunnels. And they are, as I just mentioned here about them. Oh yeah, so I read that they can, so here's a little cutaway I found, that they can tunnel not like a kingfisher as far, but they can do pretty well, a couple feet in or even up to 5. And they're very colonial, of course, not like the belted kingfisher, but you might find the belted kingfisher hole in their colony. And they are inside, they will put a little straw, grasses, leaves, rootlets for their 3 to 5 eggs. So we can go ahead to the next slide where we're going to have another little YouTube with Laurel's assistance. I always think it's good to get a little sense of the sound and the activity, especially around a bank swallow colony, which is on a big vertical bank, usually near water. Now, you hear a little? Quiet today, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, there. But since it is quiet, I can talk over him. And the males initiate the digging, and the female is evaluating how well the male is digging. Is he going to do a good enough job? And sometimes he will even sing and fly in circles like, hey, this is a great hole, this is a great hole. Are you really going to like this? And, she may go, yes, okay, cool. I'll be your mate, and maybe see when we'll hook up for the season. So there's a lot of activity with bank swallows. And with that, I think we can stop the video. I'm just going to say one more thing is that, we do have, well, 2 more things. One, that there's a conservation note for them. All swallows, any aerial insectivores are declining because we're losing insects. And so that's something we can all do, is think about reducing personally, pesticide use, herbicides, anything that's killing insects, and support good policies to do so. And then I also wanted to mention one other thing, and that's where to see them, and then we'll get to ruffling. But for people who live in this area, the best place to see a colony is over near Pineville, probably by the Crooked River Wetland Complex. And there are a couple good spots. And on those, we will also see this bird. So let's get to the ruffling swallow. Rough-winged swallows, like the burrowing owls, borrow burrows. They do not dig their burrows, and they are pesky little things that I found out. Well, they don't think they are, but when I was watching the belted kingfisher, and this is actually the back in Montana where that's kingfisher hole, I watched incubating kingfishers, and they were just plagued by these rough-winged swallows that will actually try to put their nest inside an active kingfisher nest, and of all their choices. So I'm going to read a quick little excerpt because I thought it was kind of fun. And just say another thing about watching as a citizen scientist, you never know what you're going to see that's not in the literature. And this is not in the literature. A gang of rough-winged swallows crowded the bank in mid-May, and all hell broke out. The roguish birds could have checked out the vacant holes for nests. Instead, they poked their heads often into the active burrow. One swallow gawking at an incubating kingfisher could be ignored, but too much. 11:15 a.m., the female erupted from the hole. Like Diana the huntress, she chased them off without a sound. A couple of minutes later, she flew back inside to warm her clutch of eggs. The swallows wasted no time. 6 pesky birds circled the hole, giving buzzy calls. Their light bellies were the color of pale mushrooms, contrasting with the earthy brown of their slim-pointed wings. Every few minutes, the kingfisher scooted to the entry, her bill poking out far enough to send the swallows off. If that failed, she hustled after them. And one of the things that was different is, I kept reading these descriptions of how kingfishers were just quietly incubating their eggs. Well, they get bothered by things. So they're coming in and out. And I even saw once the female bring a fish to the incubating male kingfisher inside and feed him the fish. So that was pretty exciting. And so now we're going to circle back. We've covered all these birds briefly, and I put their names up here so that we can revisit them. And it's our chance to, okay, I'm going to have a little audience, my little audience participation here. Does anyone want to tell me something they've learned new about one of these birds?
The kingfisher and the claws that they, what was the name?
Syndactyl.
Syndactyl.
Syndactyl. Toad. Thank you. Use toad.
Wild.
Carassiforme for order. All the birds. Yeah. How about you guys?
Probably the tufted puffin. I guess I always thought they were more crevices. I didn't realize that they actually dig.
Yeah. Right. And that's one reason I'm glad you mentioned that. One reason we don't have as many puffins along the Oregon coast as we used to is that this is a natural process that these islands erode. And if there's not enough soil, then the puffins can't live there. So sometimes some of the worries we have about birds are related to the climate change and all of that, but sometimes it's just a natural process. But of course, there's more islands forming with more soil. So, right, you tip anything?
Probably the burrowing owl lining entrance.
Is it done?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
And we've seen a lot of burrowing owls in Washington and culverts.
Oh, the culverts. I read that.
Yeah.
So that's
And
good.
fields.
So they're adapting in a way. Yeah. There's some, and I think that's an interesting point that I've seen too, is that, and it gives you some heart, is that birds, they're ingenious as individuals. They make decisions, and they're not above picking something that humans have made, to make their living on. And I remember, in fact, the kingfishers when I first watched them, they were checking out a man-made bank by this dam. It was just like, oh, really? That's not very good. But they're like, they don't care, whatever, it's going to work. They didn't end up using that. But sometimes our surfaces are definitely useful to birds. So I wanted to end about a little time with just a little message. And I want to share from my introduction, my book, A Scene from Oregon with kingfishers, and a little note about, I guess, how all this reflects in terms of our the importance of observation, respect for these birds. As golden sun rays lapped upon a sandstone outcrop that stood between me and a vigilant kingfisher, the receding high tide yielded just enough room to edge around the corner within view of a nest hole excavated by the diligent parents. One cautious step at a time, I ducked below leathery green leaves of a slough bush. In my black down jacket, gray pants, and rubber boots, I hoped to blend in like a cormorant. Instead, I faced the full fury of an indignant queen fisher. Her crown was a feathery two-part crest, her throne a lichen-draped branch, and her decree a volley of reproving notes. I gazed with longing at the burnished coppery red belt on a moon-white chest and yearned to plead my case. I'm your subject. I will stay right here and fasten myself to the sandstone cliff like a barnacle. I won't be in your way. But no, she breezed off to cross the bay that opened to the Pacific. I backed away into the linger of light, leaving the nesting kingfishers in peace. Listening to the National Public Radio in June of 2021, I heard the Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Yusef Komunyakaa describe his calling. It feels like one has been chosen as a caretaker of observation. For all who witness the intricacies of nature, we are the caretakers of observation too. As the climate and extinction crises accelerate, the clarion notes of kingfishers convey a ratcheting up of urgency. With care comes responsibility to act on behalf of all forms of life that cannot speak for themselves. That's the official end of my talk. And then when I looked at the clock, though, as to this, I decided we have time. We're not going to show this all because it's kind of long, but we're going to show a little bonus clip. You know how you have to have the bonus clips? So Laurel's going to show this.
I can fast forward.
Yeah, we can. Oh, yeah. We have to get and this is a burrow. As you can tell, So I guess there's a message there of persistence, diligence. You can put the feather in the burrow. So I think I'll have you, oh, there we go. This is our last slide. I'm just going to keep that up and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I'm too new to bird watching. It's just all new information.
Yeah, well, I probably skipped some important details now. Anything you want to ask?
Thank you very much for the fantastic presentation.
Oh, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.